On today's starting nine, Jake and Carl are joined by super lawyer Scott Boras to talk about the future of baseball, his role in shaping it, and maybe some recent news that has involved one of his big-time clients. It's a loaded show with one of the best interviews I've personally ever done. Let's just get into it. Action, and welcome back to Starting Nine. Carl, Jake, and Colin here, virtually in studio together. And boys, a lot of time together this week. It feels better and better every day.
It sure does. It sure does. And we got a nice guest today. We had a wonderful conversation with him. And just as you can tell, like the guy just understands the job description. And he, he's been in a situation like this before. Soto turning down a huge contract. But obviously he's very well informed and has a great team around him. And he's betting on himself. And I love to see it.
Yeah, if you have an opinion about Scott Boras, I would highly recommend sticking around for this episode and listening to this interview. Whether it's good or bad or whatever, if you even registers in your head as somebody important, by all means, you're going to want to hear what he has to say about the state of baseball.
And there's still going to be people that don't like him, even after the interview, which is fine. Like that, everybody's got haters, and typically, the more successful you are, the more people that hate you. So, and he understands that. I understand that. And it just means you're doing something right.
Amen. So we're going to get to the Scott Boras later in the show. We got some stuff up front. Let's do a little housekeeping. All right, first off the top, we talked about the bombs away prop, the starting nine prop. It hit again last night with the Mets, the Yankees, and the Dodgers. So I can't tell people enough, if you're not paying attention, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, those are typically the 3 days a week. We have the bombs away prop up in the Barstool Sportsbook app. The thing is red hot, and I keep talking to the underwriting desk at Penn National, and they're just like, we just keep pumping this out. Like, until people know enough about it, it's up 7 units on the year. So pay attention, guys. Bombs away.
Yeah, pay attention. If you like money, I mean, you'd be stupid not to check it out.
And speaking of liking money, we also have something important. If you like breaking cards or you like opening packs or you're into kind of this trend that Starting Nine is going down, I have some interesting news to tease out coming in the next couple of weeks. I think we're working on a partnership. We want to do more breaking packs. It's something you've really jumped headfirst into. So thank you for doing that, because now we're getting calls, people being like, hey, are you guys interested in this? The answer is yes.
It's just really cool. And with the way the market is, I'm always trying to put my money in tangible assets, and just watching the way that memorabilia has escalated. It's always been something that people have been into. I play with Pat Neshek, who informed me about all this kind of stuff and where to look and what has value, what's going to maintain and hold value and go up in value over time. And he just recently sold upwards of near $2 million worth of his collection. I mean, this guy's been collecting for a long, long time. And, if you're a little hesitant to put your money into the market, start to inform yourself of responsible ways to get into the memorabilia market. And it's also fun to collect with, your friends and your family and your kids. We've certainly enjoyed it. And, Carl, you and Colin have kind of experienced a little bit of that with us in LA. Just a fun, it's a hobby, but it's also a way to invest smart money if you're putting it in the right place.
Which is a perfect point and a transition into the opening headline we have, because if you're not putting your money into the right place, let me give you a perfect example. Tom Ricketts is in the process of trading away Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ, two guys you played with, no close. We really don't do as much Cubs like deep dive as probably people thought when we started the show. Like, here comes Carl, Cubs guy, and Jake, obviously, with his experience playing for the Cubs. Like, we don't really spend a lot of time going behind the scenes with the Cubs. Part of that is because when big stuff happens with the Cubs, I want the conversation to count. So I've been kind of like sitting here waiting for something to happen.
Well, this is a big conversation to have. It's obviously one of the most high-profile catchers in baseball. A guy that can really change the game for you, especially with his defense. And then with a guy like Happ. I mean, obviously he was an all-star this year. He's a nice bat from both sides of the plate. He can play outfield, so it's an opportunity for teams on both sides to bolster their roster for the team that would get a player like Contreras and Happ could help them take that next step, solidify a wild card spot, or try and jump into the division lead, depending on where they're at. And then for the Cubs, they're obviously not ready to make their move towards the postseason, and you can just tell that when you have two teams like the Cardinals and the Brewers doing what they're doing in front of you. You just know it's not their opportunity yet. So we'll see when they decide to strike. In my mind, it's going to come soon, because I don't know how long guys like Jed Hoyer, Tom Ricketts, David Ross are gonna just kind of sit back and allow this to continue to happen. They want to win. They've all been there before. They know what it's like when their team is on fire. They know what it does for the city. So I can't imagine they sit back and wait too much longer. I mean, it could be another year, maybe 2 years, but I see it happening in the near future.
So we talked pre-show, like I told you there was something very surprising, and for me the writing on the wall with Contreras was there when they got rid of Schwarber, when they didn't bring Lester back for a low amount, when when Len Casper goes down the street to do radio for the White Sox, and Theo leaves early on his contract, and you just see all the writing on the wall. They trade guys away last year. Like, there's no way they're going to extend Willson Contreras and pay him market value to be a catcher on a team that struggles to be 15 games under 500. So that to me was like, they're definitely going to get rid of this guy. Good on Willson Contreras for playing at such a high level, where now obviously the Mets are rumored. He's not going anywhere that isn't going to contend for a pennant.
No way.
The Ian Happ stuff, though, kills me, because he's literally the only player on the roster left that has been developed with some time left that you could extend, who's finally reaching his potential, who looks like he's going to be like a very solid player for the next 5 full seasons, like at the very least. And he's a good dude. He's sharp. He's the type of guy you'd want your draft picks around. Like, as a fan, I see all this stuff about Ian Happ, and I totally did not see that trade. When they said he might get traded, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe if it's a huge package, to the point now where they're hugging each other in the dugout, crying, and people are like, yeah, guaranteed Ian Happ's gone. Everybody wants him. I had no clue saw that coming.
Yeah, well, the phones, I'm sure, were ringing off the hook with interest for Happ as well, and rightfully so. He just does so many things well, and he's just a solid all-around human being. He can slide into any clubhouse and fit in immediately. And yeah, it's tough to see, but man, when you show that you're willing to get rid of guys like Rizzo and Schwarber and Chris Bryant and Javi Baez, I mean, everybody's fair game. I mean, that's just the way it is. And it seems like it's going to set them back quite a bit to get rid of a field general like Contreras, and then a guy as solid as Ian Happ. Like, now you have to replace those guys. You're gonna bring somebody else in who's already big league ready, or you're gonna hope that somebody who's on the verge of being big league ready is able to and capable of stepping into that role. I mean, those are enormous shoes to fill. And it's, this game's incredibly hard at that level. So you can have a guy who you think is going to be ready to fill that spot, and then he shits the bed, or he's not very good for 2 or 3 years, and then that sets you back even further. So those guys in the front office have an incredibly difficult job to do, and I'm not saying I could do it any better, but it's tough to give away 2 guys like that.
Brings me back to the Charlie Blackmon interview when we were talking about trading Nolan Arenado, and he's like, guys, it's just hard to think of how you can get rid of a player like that and then get better as a team.
No doubt about it. And, the Rockies were such a frustrating team to watch for years and years and years, because it's like, wow, these guys destroy the baseball. And yes, okay, maybe they hit a little bit better in Colorado than they do other places, but God, they just never had the ability to pitch at a high level, or they never had. You need at least 2 top of the rotation guys, and if you don't have that, like, look at the Cubs. You're trying to go up against the Cardinals and the Brewers. You just have no shot. And no disrespect to the Cubs. I mean, anybody with a big league uniform, like I've said before, is a good player. But they've got, they got Steele, and they've got Thompson and Stroman struggling, and Hendricks is on the IL. And they have Smiley, who's a nice left-handed arm. But Steele and Thompson are they're babies. Like they're just now figuring some things out. They could both end up being 1s and 2s, or a 3. I think is should be the floor for those guys. I think at worst, both those guys are number 3. But man, without a couple of horses at the top that are bona fide 1s and 2s, it's incredibly hard to compete at the top of any division.
So now that the Cubs are in the process of getting rid of these guys, you can take obviously the 2 all-stars on the team. Without them there's very reasonable to suspect that like it's going to get worse before it gets better to close out the season. I'm trying to think. I think we talked about this at the All-Star game, but you've shared stuff with Wilson Contreras before that I just loved, and I'm going to run this segment back on Redline on like the Chicago Sports Podcast to share some of the stuff about like what's going on with the Cubs, because I think it's like very relevant crossover. But one of the things I was interested if we've shared this on the show, or maybe this is something you said to me at the All-Star game, but you're like there's one type of person who would ever mess with Wilson Contreras in Major League Baseball, and that type of person is who?
That type of person is the guy that doesn't understand what sort of crazy Wilson Contreras is, and in a good way. Like he's got a couple different levels that he can go to that most people don't have, and in the heat of the moment, you're gonna stand up to just about anybody to protect your guys. But man, there'd be somebody'd walk away with several broken bones if they decided to get into any sort of altercation with Wilson Contreras. And anybody that knows him at all will tell you the exact same thing. And I loved having him behind the plate. And how many times have you seen a guy get drilled, and the first thing Wilson does, he tears the mask off and he takes like 4 or 5 hard steps towards the pitcher and then gets in front of the guy that just got drilled. Like, hey, I understand you're mad, but if you want to go to that next level, you're going to have to deal with me too.
So now that you mentioned that, I don't think anybody's charged them out against Wilson. Like while he's caught, I can't think of the time when someone charged them out against the Cubs.
No, I can't either. And not to say that it would never happen, because, yeah, let's face it, guys are going to get pissed off, and sometimes you go to that extreme and you're okay with potentially getting your ass kicked. And everybody, thinks they're tough until they get punched in the face. And I don't condone violence, but I don't shy away from it, and Wilson doesn't either.
So good luck to these guys as they're like packing their bags and moving out. I would imagine leaving the Cubs is, I would guess, tell me if I'm wrong, this has to be like one, it's not like leaving a normal team. Like it's got to be a little bit different.
Well, when you've been through certain things that guys have been through in Chicago, it makes it even more difficult. Hap wasn't on, these guys weren't on the World Series team with us, but they were right there. Hap debuted in 2017, I believe it was, and Contreras was right there also, wasn't he?
The second Contreras came up, the fan base instantly took a deep breath, because it was like, holy shit, we have this catcher for the future.
This is
a time when Montero and Ross were probably one of the best 1-2 catching punches you had without Contreras. And then when Contreras came up, it was just a completely different level. Yeah,
we had 2 extremely qualified veteran leaders behind the plate for us. Very different guys, but both leaders, vocal leaders. Miggy, just one of the most hilarious dudes you'll ever meet. I got a really funny story about him, and it's kind of the language barrier thing. So it's in spring training, and I'm sitting down with like 6 or 7 guys eating our breakfast, and Miggy Montero is near the toasters, like looking extremely confused. And he's got like a piece of untoasted bread in his hand, and all the toasters are full. So the toasters pop up, and he's looking around like waiting for somebody to come get their toast so he can put his in. Like he's starting to get, a little pissed off. He needs his toast. And he looks around, no one's coming to get the toast out of the toaster. And he turns to me and he goes, "Hey, dude, whose breads are this?" And I just like started slapping the table. I'm like, "Whose breads are this?" And I go, "Man, I don't know whose breads. I really don't. But just like, take them out. So yeah, obviously a language barrier. but still hilarious. Enjoyed playing with him. I actually might have been one of the reasons he was released in Washington, because he was unable to, throw guys out out at second base. But I was slow to the plate. It sucked. But long story short, those guys were amazing for us. And then when Wilson stepped in, like you said, we all thought like, hey, okay, this guy's going to be here for 8-10 years. There's no way around it. And then things just transpire in a different direction, and now here we are on the verge of him and Hap getting traded. Where do you think they go?
Great question. So I think that Hap can end up in a number of teams. I'd say anywhere from like the Mariners and the Guardians, down to like, the White Sox would be a crazy landing spot for him, but they make a tremendous amount of sense. I don't think they have the young players that the Cubs want. And then
that's the question. Okay? How much are you gonna? No disrespect to Hap. How much are you gonna get back for an Ian Happ? Obviously, you're gonna get a lot more for a Contreras. Who has those guys like you're saying? And the Cubs could use everything. Pick a spot. They could obviously use an outfielder. They could use everybody could use a starting pitcher, or they obviously need a catcher. So it's such a difficult thing to analyze without, like I said, kind of being in those meetings and understanding the depth of everybody's farm system and what's really going to help impact your team the most. These are tough things to go over, man. It really is. But I could see Hap in Seattle for sure. Could
you say, let's say the Marlins are 4.5 games out of the wild card? That's pretty crazy, right? That'd be pretty crazy to trade for Ian Happ. But you have the starting pitching where if you get into a 7-game series, you can send out Pablo Lopez.
I don't think that's as risky. Could you see Wilson Contreras in Miami?
Yeah, I think Wilson Contreras to me is going to the Mets, and that's it. Like, I think the Mets are gonna, Colin, I know your computer's a little messed up, but if you want to chime in on what the package is, it's unbelievable.
Well, look, so I do agree with you. And if Wilson were to go to Miami, and you're in the wild card spot, you're gonna have to give up several guys, and that's extremely risky. I don't think the risk reward is there for a team like Miami. So I definitely agree with you that if he gets shipped, he's going to a team that's already at the top of the division.
Yeah, a team that's like, wait a second, the only thing we need is somebody to just bring this all together. Now, I guess from your perspective, and this can just be with Wilson or using Wilson as like a higher point about just bringing in a catcher this late in the season. Like, you already have, or maybe your catcher isn't hitting as well as you'd like, but I would imagine as a starting pitcher, you're like, I don't hit 200, hit 150, hit 350.
Well,
if you're on board with me, then that's fine.
Sure, and I've told you this a lot. Like, I didn't really care who was behind the plate. I know that there were pitchers in the past and currently that were really adamant about having a certain one of their two guys behind the plate when they're on the mound. And what I tell you, I was like, I as long as you have a glove back there, I don't care who's behind the plate. If we go over scouting reports and we can get somewhat on the same page, and look, if you call something I don't like, I can shake it off. That can disrupt the timing and the flow of the game a little bit. But as long as you're back there and we're fighting together, I didn't really care who it was, and that's no disrespect to anybody. I think that's actually respect to everyone. Like, if you're a major league catcher and you're back there and we're fighting together, I don't give a shit. We'll be fine. And there are guys there are guys that are a lot better defensively. JT Realmuto, Wilson Contreras, like these are gangsters behind the plate defensively. They catch and throw better than anybody. But again, like, some of that is my job to control the running game. And then again, there's not as many stolen base threats in the game now as there used to be. So you're okay sometimes with allowing that guy to steal, as long as you're not sacrificing your stuff at the plate. Because the last thing you want to do is be out there trying to control the running game. The guy tries to steal second base, you hang a breaking ball, and you give up a 2-run homer. So you're willing to give up certain things if you get others in return. But yeah, I mean, man, if Wilson goes to the Mets, that's a huge statement. And that division is all but over.
Colin, what have you heard about what the Mets would be willing to give up for Contreras?
Yeah, sorry, my internet's fucking up and shit. I don't know what's going on over here.
You're doing great, buddy.
At least it's
Honestly,
his and not
not
ours.
sure. They're not going to be giving up any of their top prospects, like Alvarez or Beatty. I could see like maybe Vientos, who can be like first baseman, outfielder, like utility player, something like that. But I don't see them giving up anything major for them, especially since he's going to be a rental, and we saw that with like Baez last year. Like, if you're not going to sign him, then there's no point in losing our prospects again. So we'll see.
Be interesting to see if the Mets learn from the fact that like you did give up Pete Crow Armstrong, who by every scouting report or whatever since he's come over says the guy's like a future everyday center fielder, an impactful everyday center fielder. So it'll be interesting to see because if the Mets come back this year and give up more than that, or they do overextend themselves for Contreras, then I think it does give you a good peek into the head of leadership there, where it's like, this is a special team. We've been following them all season. Like they do have incredible magic to go through and withstand Scherzer and DeGrom, and then get better over that time. And then to bring in Vogelbach, you see they're already like taking those necessary steps. If they give up more for Contreras, then Mets fans would feel comfortable. At the end of the day, though, I'd still feel good that my owner was going all in that present moment, because we've talked before, Colin. You're like, dude, we've bullshit before. It's like, it's okay if you guys don't win the World Series. You're like, no, I want one. Like, you as a fan have one, and a fan who has one cannot talk to a fan who doesn't have one. And I do like your perspective on that. So I think either way, like, you guys go after Contreras, to me that's a huge positive.
Yeah, if you're going to trade for a guy like that and give up what you're probably going to have to give up, don't you agree? I think we could all agree that you need to sign that guy. You need to be committed to signing the guy, because if you don't, you give up all that and maybe not get a ring, and then you're just kind of standing there like, shit, what the hell did we do? Now we definitely set ourselves back. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. I would love to see that happen. Wilson get traded, a team gives up a few of their big dogs, and then they lock him up for 5, 6, 7 years.
And then we can go out and go watch him play using tickets from Game Time. I want to thank the exclusive ticketing partner of Barstool Sports. It's a ticketing app that's made it easier than ever to score last-minute deals on tickets to sports, concerts, and shows, and they guarantee the lowest price. They cracked the code on how to score deals on last-minute tickets. You can find MLB tickets for under $15 all in on Game Time. Yankees tickets down to $14. Same with the Red Sox. Mets $13. Cubs $12. You name it, Game Time has the hookup on deals for you to get to our ballpark. The biggest last-minute price drops can be found on the seats you thought you could never buy. Obviously, we use Game Time like crazy when we're out in Los Angeles. Got unbelievable seats to the Home Run Derby and the All-Star Game. And the best part is you guys get $20 off your first purchase. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, go to the account tab to create a login, and redeem code START@9 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Game Time. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, so I'm looking at the MLB Wildcard. I think it's interesting to spend just like a minute on the Wildcard here. And the Los Angeles Angels are 11 games out of the Wildcard, a team we talked about early in the season. And Ohtani, I read an argument this morning for Ohtani to be traded, and I loved the argument.
It's embarrassing though that a team like Anaheim is even having to consider that. Don't you agree? Like, you're a guy like that, maybe the best player, all-around player we've ever seen in the game, they're not able to find a way, and with Mike Trout, not able to find a way to surround those guys with a supporting cast good enough to get those guys into the postseason. And you got to give some credit to Houston, like we have in the past. Like, they're, as you call, a wagon. They just don't lose. But it's just sad. Like, a guy that can generate as much revenue as Ohtani and Trout can also generate, and we're talking about potentially seeing those guys be moved.
Yeah, Ohtani gives you reach to an entire continent,
to the world.
Fans. Yes, like, you have the most densely populated part of the world, or one, I should say, to like grow your brand and stuff, and they're at the point where they just can't figure it out. I saw a comparison to say like Ohtani could very reasonably be worth like $50 to $60 million because if you paid him as the hitter he's worth and you paid him as the pitcher he's worth, like
that's a
your
fact.
Comparison is Max Scherzer and like Matt Olson.
That's a fact. Yes, I mean, and I think that we're going to start seeing that more and more. Guys are going to get paid, especially at the high end, more towards their actual AAV. And when you look at like the Soto thing, I mean, what do you think that guy's actually generating for an organization every year? I mean, yeah, they might pay him 35, 40, 42 million a year. He's making that organization way more money than that. That's why teams are able to go out and spend that kind of money on these sort of players.
Yeah, you could make the argument that like Juan Soto deserves to be paid like 100 times more than the league minimum. You could say like he's so like you can just bring in as many replacement players as you want and not a single person will move the needle the way Juan Soto
Not even
does. Close.
And he's so much – how much better is Juan Soto on a winning team? Yeah, I mean, he's what is he hitting at 260 or something like that. We know historically what he's capable of. I mean, the average is a little bit down. But you put him around some potent bats, other potent bats, like it's through the roof.
Yeah, I got it for you. His on base percentage is probably the craziest thing to me. It is 166 points higher than his average. He's hitting 245 and he's still getting on base at a 401 clip.
Yeah.
Like last year he walked 145 times and struck out 93.
Yeah, it's truly incredible, and it didn't just happen overnight. I mean, he's had that type of play discipline basically from the moment he got to the big leagues. I mean, he almost won Rookie of the Year. Who won Rookie of the Year in 2018? Because he was number 2, but then he's his second season he's top 10 in MVP. Then he's top 5 in MVP in 2020 with the Silver Slugger. 2021 he's number 2 in MVP with an All-Star and a Silver Slugger. Like, I mean, if you just look at his accolades, they continue to get better and better.
I'm looking at now that you say a couple of the AL MVPs, I'm going to rattle these off to you. 3 in a row. Aaron Judge, then Shohei, then Yordan Alvarez. Ugh. Okay, so we're getting to a good point to bring in Scott Boras as we're kind of going through some of this trade stuff. I do want to stick on the wild card for a second before we get to Scott. So this is kind of the point in the season where, if you were in the first half, right, you want your club as a player, as a fan, as somebody who's interested in Major League Baseball, who identifies with the club. You obviously are, the first half's like, where do we stack up with the division? And to me, I'm not like if someone wants to talk to me about the wild card in like May or June, I would rather just send you down the river. We're getting to August here, and this is wild card season. This is where you kind of like start to circle like where's all the drama going to be in September? Because a lot of the drama isn't around the division. We got a couple divisions that are, heating up with the Mets and the Braves, and the Central's divisions are going to be the Central divisions until the end of the year. But this is where you get to see like the AL East, all right? You got the Blue Jays, you've got the Rays at the top of that wild card, the Mariners and their big run. You brought up the Orioles in the pre-show, and it's like even now they're 49 and 48, and
they're like, right there. Got to give them a lot of credit. And the teams that know they're gonna deal with getting their ass kicked and guys getting shuffled around and just that Ferris wheel up and down, right, in the big leagues in AAA, and there's who know. I'd be interested to see how many guys that they've used this season, and not just them, other guys other teams that are kind of at that point where it's next man up. Like if you're not performing, if you've been in the big leagues for a year or two, now hey, we've given you opportunities. Now we got to see what somebody else can do. So everybody's fighting for a uniform, and they're also showing themselves that they're in a position to fight for a wild card, which I think is really, really awesome. Everybody in the AL East has an opportunity, even though Boston has been as bad as they have. But it's good to see that for fans too, knowing that your team is still fighting as we approach August.
So one really cool stat about the Orioles that kind of fits this narrative that you're talking about like, yeah, this is really cool to see as a fan. Like, since the Orioles called up Adley Rutschman, I believe they're 31-24 or 32-24. Yeah. They're 8 games over 500. They were 7 games under 500 before they brought him up. And you could say, well, it's the number one prospect. The starting pitching has a point. Their ERA is 0.7 runs lower when Adley Rutschman's catching versus when he wasn't catching.
And that's a big deal. Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. And you win games by, I'm not saying anything groundbreaking, by giving up less runs than the other team. And if he's obviously showing the ability to kind of handle and manage that pitching staff. And, I think we all kind of knew that he was going to be that kind of guy once he came up. He's basically he's like a Matt Wieters, and those guys don't come around very often.
So on the subject of future of baseball, it's probably good to get to Scott now. We had him in the All-Star game hotel. Obviously, I'm curious, was it awkward for you because you guys have like an existing relationship to sit there and interview this guy, No,
I mean, shit, I've interviewed Scott many times, and the first time was obviously when I was deciding which agent to go with, and I get out to Orange County and we sit down and we have conversation for the first time, and he just goes on and on and on and on, and it's not in a bad way. It's like, man, I could listen to this guy talk about baseball. I just put him on an audiobook and just let him go. I mean, he knows the game front and back, and he's continuing to do great things for the game of baseball and the players. So yeah, it was great to sit down with him, and no, I loved it, and I know you did as well. Anytime you can get Scott to talk about what he's passionate about, and that being baseball, is a great thing.
So before we get to Scott, I just want to say thank you to Roman for sponsoring this episode. Testosterone affects a lot of aspects of men's fitness and health, from sex drive to muscle and bone mass. The experts believe testosterone plays a huge role in our body's natural function. But men's testosterone starts to deplete with age, which is why it's important you support it early. Roman T-Support is meant to help men maintain their body's natural testosterone production with the proprietary supplement formulated by Roman's in-house doctors. Roman T-Support contains a blend of 6 nutrients, including, ready, ashwagandha to support healthy testosterone levels, magnesium to support muscular health, vitamin D3, a fat-soluble vitamin that plays a role in bone health and supports several cellular processes, and zinc, an important trace mineral in the body that plays a role in muscle development. Roman T-Support is not testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, and is not meant to treat people with testosterone deficiency syndrome. If you're interested in Roman T-Support, go to getroman.com/starting to get $15 off your first order of Roman T-Support. That's getroman.com/starting, getroman.com/starting. T-Support. So, thank you. We're Scott Boras brings the best out of me. So I've been telling everybody in my personal life who will listen to me, like, wait till you guys get a chance to hear Scott Boras talk to us because the interview's that good. So I finally get to shut up and just let you guys listen to it. So let's get to Scott. All right, we're in the interview portion of today's show. We are joined by Scott Boras. Scott, thanks so much. This is a busy week for everybody, and we're delighted you could give us some time today.
Well, when Jake Arrieta summons me, I have to be there.
Is that so?
That's how it works.
That's too polite.
Is that every former client, or is it someone of his stature?
Well, you have to remember that this is our first 159 in the draft that becomes Mr. Cy. So it's a pretty special thing.
Wow. Did you know that?
I did not.
You were the first guy ever that, wow.
Yeah.
Now, do you take a lot of pride in that with your clients, or kind of what's that relationship?
I take pride in the fact that, Calvin Murray, who works for us and former major leaguer, he and Jake developed a relationship. Scott Champerino, guys that helped develop Jake in the process, because he wasn't drafted where his talent should have been. And this guy went through a development process young in his career that was really, really difficult because people kept telling him not to be who he was. And finally we got him traded to the Cubs and he became who he was, and then skyrocketed. And when you have men that begin the highest award for their individual performance and also carry a team to a world championship, for me that's that's a remarkable career achievement that few men can sustain. And I have great admiration because I know how difficult it was, because this was not the 1-1 pick who has gone through the process. He had to fight like crazy to make it.
So I want to get to some All-Star stuff, but we're right here, and this is really cool stuff because you're with him 2018. We've never talked about this on the show. This is a huge piece, obviously, in your career and life. And the move over to Philadelphia, and that happened pretty late. Like, he missed out on spring training and stuff. So, like, can we go back a couple of years and those conversations with him? Do you remember when you had to call him and be like, yo, it's the Phillies, it's not the Cubs? Or how did that kind of go down?
Yeah, well, and just before you answer, we were actually having this conversation a little bit ago about how things in the game started to shift a little bit that offseason. And I told him I was in Miami at John Jay's house and trying to figure out what's going to happen, kind of getting frustrated, as you knew. Right? We had conversations at least a couple times a week, and you know, you're on the phone with teams daily and kind of passing along all that information. And then I get home. So John Jay signed with the White Sox. I flew home. It was maybe a few days later, approaching mid-March, I believe it was. And I think I was in bed asleep. I think it was around midnight when you made that phone call to me. And it was relief, but also at the same time, like, the frustration, continued to mount because, I'm at a Division III school, which is a great place, but I'm throwing sim games and not being in a clubhouse, acclimating with my new teammates. So it was a very frustrating process. But you were there with me every step of the way, walking me through it. And, basically we had a conversation about just remaining patient, and something will eventually happen.
Yeah, trusting a player's ability. It's not that teams don't want them. There's a valuation that goes with it. And the subjectivity of free agency is that I remember in that market we had Jake and it might have been Eric Hosmer. We had JD Martinez. These are all all-star level players. And the teams just were not moving in a direction towards signing. But I've been through this enough that sometimes it's in November, clearly a lot of times in January, and sometimes it gets into late February and March. And I kept telling Jake, I remember I went through this with Greg Maddux. I mean, elite talent pitchers. Max Scherzer didn't sign until, February, late January, February. So it has nothing to do with your skill. Don't think it does. But when you're home, you're working out, you've waited for this free agent moment. It is a psychological, really a war you go through, going, why do I pitch so well and do so well at this level? And why do teams not want me? And the reality of it is they're all going through trade windows. They're going through financial considerations. And normally for a lot of teams, the last step they want to make is the commitment to the free agent player because they know it's got heavy economic measures to it. And so patience is very important. But for me, in representing them, you go and over the years, you evaluate skill, you evaluate the productivity of the player, you know what the player can mean to an organization. And you have a certain confidence level. And in every instance, that demand will surface. And the hardest part is to tell players at what time that will happen.
So then you talked a little bit about, like, that 2018 window when free agency kind of changed a little bit. And I understand where you're saying where, like, the bids just out of nowhere, things have just been kind of building. And then there's just a point where, like, I don't know if it's like a bubble that pops or whatever, but are you seeing it kind of come back a little bit? Or when you're in that moment, do you foresee that? Because I, as a fan, get a sense that there isn't complete independence amongst owners.
Well, in 2019, for example, we had I signed Strasburg, Cole, and Rendon in a literally 72-hour dynamic where the team spent, and we negotiated like $1.3 billion worth of contracts, in that. And yet the year before, we're going through a situation where the markets have ebbs and flows. They have demands. They have a certain manner of thinking that they do. And I think the predictability is that the economics point to a rise in the revenues of the game. That's the first criteria. Because you know then that the markets will be something different than they were, because the demand will be different, because it's good business to do that. And so once you've established that, and we have a whole group, we have 140 people in our company, we have a group assigned to the economic evaluations of franchises. So we have a knowledge of the revenue streams that clubs have, what they do, so that when you're talking with billionaires, you can kind of talk their language and you can understand what they know, franchise value appreciation. You have historical models that they look at, because there's sometimes general speak about we can't do this, we can't do that. And a lot of times you can say that I'd like to know why this isn't a good business decision for you, and really speak of their pursuit of their goals and what they want to do. Because when you're negotiating with somebody, you have to really be a good listener, and you have to be someone that wants to really understand the goals of what they want to do and why they want to do it. And then you historically track their course and say, if you were there in that time, would you have done things differently? And many of them are very objective. Owners are not emotional. They're billionaires. They're very thorough about how they assess what couldn't happen. And a lot of times you're able to intervene and say, well, are we not repeating that? Are we not looking into this where we can take a different track, and it might open a door for them to look at this business model a little differently?
When a team tells you, and this has happened historically in the past, that they're in a tough spot financially, they're losing money, or things aren't going the way it has in the past, they know that you know that that's dishonest. Because, it just seems like that's something that's fairly easy for you to decipher.
I think the characterization of losing, I said, first thing is, the one thing we know that's true losing is your record. Because whatever your last name is, you will be Mr. Loser in your hometown if your record is what it is, okay? So these things are the first process. When we're talking about losing money, I always say that I'll talk to you about your revenues. You're going to have to, I'm not going to ask you to illustrate your expenses to me. But I just want you to know that I understand what your revenues are. Now, how you use that revenue stream to define losing money, that may be corporately responsible for you. It might be a way of doing things, but in the process of putting together revenues and doing these things, it's something that for them to know that you know what they have to work with, however they define that in a characterization of losses or profits. And also remember that in franchise appreciation, when you bought a team in 2000 and the team is, for 180 million and the team is now worth 3 billion, and you say you're losing money, you're going to say, well, isn't that a perspective of how much you've annualized your thought process versus the equity element of this? You're a multi-billionaire.
That's not how those guys think, too, because those guys think in the terms of long-term value. So then to turn around and wave cash flows in front of our face, while in the back door, these billionaires who've amassed fortunes through this great thought process, right? They're very intelligent guys. But it's a great dichotomy that you point out there. They say, we don't have the money now, but on the back burner, all these appreciation values. It's stark to actually think about it in that context. So all I'm thinking about while you're talking like this, Scott, is at this point in your career, do you have a competitor? And I don't mean an entity, but is there like a person you compete against other than yourself? Like what puts you to the point where you're like, we need economic forecasts for the team. I need to know all this stuff, because you're already the best at what you do.
Well, thank you for that, Carl. But the truth, it's a funny thing that when you you go to, you're in Little League and you're in Babe Ruth and you're in high school and you're in college. Coaches always came. They came to pick you up, and you were always like the best of where you were, and you led the team at hitting in college, and you get titles and awards. And then you go to spring training and you remember and you see, and I played with a guy named Gary Templeton and Keith Hernandez and all these guys. I'm going like, geez, I'm a pretty good hitter, but I don't run like them. I certainly don't catch like them. You start to understand that your competitor in this life, to be the best you can be, is how you can figure out how to beat the game. And you wake up with the game every day. His children, I put them in the file, pictures of them. And whenever I open it up and I'm negotiating for their family. And I got Britt on the phone. I got a wife, I got children, and I know what his primary is in life. I know that. And because of that, I'm like going, okay, I don't represent a building. I don't represent a piece of clay. I represent human beings. That's the motivation. The second thing is that the game we're taking on, I got to keep this guy healthy. We got to figure out ways to do this. And you deal with our medical team and our staff, and you keep growing a company. You invest millions of dollars that no one else can, because we have the true blessing of these guys generationally that have given us the revenue to make divisions of our company that no one has psychologists in an agency. We do. No one has a medical staff and a training staff. They just rely on the teams to do it. We don't. We communicate with the teams, and we have our own, and we're doing studies, and they're going things because we want advanced durability. We want to do these things. So in trying to beat the game, you're still playing in a way, you're still doing this. And the joy of it is we don't do any other sport. We just love our game our way. And we try to pass that benefit of that knowledge on to the players, because people think that what we do is about money. But remember, to get a player to free agency, the percentile is less than 10% where they're going to have value in free agency. And the durability factor and the psychology to manifest that, to achieve the standards that the elite like Jake have achieved, it's just so rare. And I'm very proud of the fact that we have in volume the performance levels of MPVs and Cy Youngs and All-Stars, that our players in number are achieving that at much higher rates than others. And that's really how I evaluate our success, is the success of the players that we represent.
Well, and you're very financially stable. Honestly, I know that you don't do this strictly for money. I've been with you since 2007, 2008, and I've seen it firsthand. Like Carl, he's probably had more phone conversations with my wife, Brittany, than we've been on the phone. And when he talks about, truly caring about the players and setting them up, and setting their families up, that's something I learned early on. And that's, when you're as good at what you are as you are, you have a lot of haters out there. And I think that you probably embrace some of that. You probably enjoy a little bit of that. And I don't know if I've met a harder worker in my life. I mean, I'm sure you've had more sleepless nights than just about anybody out there, and you truly love the game. I mean, you could stop doing what you do, but you won't, because you care about your players and you love this game. And I think that's something that kind of gets lost, like with the Soto situation. We have advisors, we have agents for a reason. And if we didn't need them, we wouldn't have them. But that's not something that we can embark on our own. There's just we're baseball players. We're not lawyers, we're not attorneys. Like, we put our uniform on and we play the game, and we need counsel, we need guidance. We need a team of people, like he says, with psychologists, the strength
there
coaches.
There are professionals that approach their jobs in front offices with the same focus and talent level that you and your peers take out to the field, where it's so hard to be one of those people that are up there making those decisions. They're cutthroat. They don't care. They're not sitting around. That's my impression, right? I'm just a fan. And I would imagine from your perspective too, then when you're a player, it's like you have to get knowing that those people are trying to take advantage of in a sense, they are trying to take advantage
Well, they're
of
trying to
the
get you
most
for
they
as
can.
cheap as possible.
So you need people in your corner, right? Do you sense that,
Well,
or do you feel that way with front
I
office
think the
relationships?
ideology, and maybe I reduce this to a very visceral understanding of it, is that when you're going to go and play poker with someone who's played poker for 30 or 40 years, and that is a billionaire owner, do you know how many negotiations those men are being in? Do you know how many people they read and understand? Do you know how they can manipulate a conversation? So you can imagine a player who, a lot of players feel, well, maybe I want to do this myself. And it's kind of like, for me, you want to make sure you're the boss. Of course you do. But the thing of it is, you go to a doctor and say, look, I want my appendix removed because I know something's wrong. And then you have a surgeon do it. But if you try to do it yourself, it's going to be a little bit of a bloody mess. And so when you're stepping into this arena and you're suggesting that owners or veteran general managers they've worked years to be in their relative position, they're very professional. I can adjust tones of voice. I can talk to you about blinks. I can talk to you about things that are maladies in their conduct where something tells you about what they think of something. And don't think that those men, if a player were to walk into a room and say, I've done 0 negotiations or I've done 1, and I should be in the room to give an owner all those tells, I would suggest to him, you want to make sure that you would talk to someone about what you want and how you're going to get it. And if you feel that you want to talk about in the performance levels of the organization, how it can improve, how you can improve, that's one thing. But when you're getting into the heart of a negotiation, markets, economics, and realities, you're stepping into the thing that made them a captain of the industry. These men are very successful at what they do, and you have to be respectful of it. You also have to know how to approach someone so that the negotiation and the theater of it is something that's prepared, professional, unemotional. All those criteria go in, and so it's something for me to say, what advice would I give you? What are you going to tell me to do? If a player says, I want to come into the room and talk with you and do that, I would then counsel, okay, this is what you would talk about, but clearly this is what you wouldn't talk about in this dynamic, because if you do, you're going to expose something that's going to really damage what you would know the market is and what their perception of the market is. Because remember, it's a funny thing about an industry where market perception for an owner is always based upon the past. Yet their conduct of revenues is always based upon projections of the future. And so if you allow that gap to be, the bridge is lost and then you fall right into the river. And so you've got to know so much about what they know about, because that's how the intellectual grade is professionally extended, discussed. And certainly everyone's going to have opinions, but to reach a fairness standard, it requires a broad base of experience and current appraisal information. And all of that must go to the player. And then the player gives you a map, a roadmap of what he most wants, where he wants it from, and how it's done. And remember that particularly for most people, I'm a lawyer. I don't like to even to use the agent term because I follow a fiduciary duty to a player where I'm going to operate from everything that he gives me consent to do. And if you know that you have that standard, then that negotiation experience can really benefit you in a room.
So for right now with Juan Soto, is it the Nationals coming to you, or is this more of a proactive dual conversation? Because that's a big news story, right, with you and the, like that's where your name's coming up right now. And as you're talking about your player map and stuff out, like while a guy's still kind of under contract, are you taking those steps with current clubs, or do you let the current club kind of dictate that relationship?
Well, I'll speak in general terms without being player specific because of the attorney-client privilege. But the point of it is that any great player, if I'm an owner, I want to do what? I want to pursue him. And I respect that. I would, my attitude on all this, listen, tell the player. Listen everything they have to say, tell the player. Be objective about it, and then you go forward and do it. And like in cases where a team is going to offer a large volume of money to a player who's going to be a free agent at 26, well, no kidding, right? The years are not an issue in that contract because there hasn't been a 26-year-old free agent as a superstar in 20 years. They're rare. So, of course, you're going to get a lot of years. That's a given. The second thing of it is that when you look at what historically we've done with players, and I went back to A-Rod's contract, for example, is that he got the highest AAV in the marketplace, and he got an extended term, and I created a new thing in the contract element, which was an opt-out. And I remember when I explained this to Al, he didn't know what an opt-out was because no one in baseball had ever used it. It's a legal term, and it allows you to get out of the contract when you're 30, 31. Well, as that worked, Jeter signed a contract for 10 years. He didn't have an opt-out. He couldn't get out till 34. So A-Rod got an extension or a new contract at 275, and Jeter, who was probably the Yankee because of the rights thing, he had to wait 4 years and got a contract that was, in the 50s or 60s, all because he couldn't get to the market at the right age.
And that's a big thing, right? Like you allowing a player to play through a certain percentage of the contract with an opt-out, potential opt-out, to re-enter the market at an optimal age.
It's really changed baseball in many ways because, for example, I did this with Nick Castellanos. Nick was a player. He signed a 4-year contract. He had an opt-out after year 1 and 2. He played right for the Reds, had an all-star season, and he got to opt out right after that. And he converted that $60 million contract, opted out after 2 years. So basically ended up making $100 million plus the 32 he made it. So he made 132, and he did it in the prime of his career. So I knew when I created this concept that it was going to be new to teams. It was very hard to explain. Well, what's that? I said, you have options over players. Players are going to have the option to get out of the contract rather than you have an option to extend it. It's a similar circuitry. And why wouldn't they have that right? And because clubs have demand for players, they put those things in, and it helps us sometimes lower the amount of money that they didn't want to pay because we have more rights in the contract. It's more beneficial to the player. So it allows you another negotiating arm to do it. But the key thing is that, it was new. It was widely misunderstood. It wasn't used, but we used it multiple times. We had it in J.D. Drew's contract, and it really benefited a lot of players.
Now that kind of changed the game, right? And so how did that kind of work out for the first time? You said it was you used it for the first time with A-Rod in his contract.
Correct.
How did that kind of transpire? Was that a conversation? Did you just come up with that, or did you have conversations with guys?
I kept thinking about the fact that I knew I was going to get years, but I didn't want a player in the market at 34. Because players at 34,
the market.
So I want him to enter at the customary age of 30, 31. I also looked at performance gradients to say, when are we going to have the highest performance levels of a player? And it happens to be between that as ages of 23 and 32 and 33. They're still good after that.
Yeah, and there's some outliers.
But the highest performance levels are in that quadrant. So when I looked at that, I said, look, I got a 25-year-old free agent here. I should be able to, in this instance, under these circumstances, the AAV of the market had to change so dramatically because I did Kevin Brown's contract for $15 million, which was a record then.
Was that the first $100 million
first
contract?
$100 million. And before that, a few years before that, I got Greg Maddux, $11.5 million. And then 5 years before that, I got Greg Maddux, $6 million. So each one was a record contract. And so I knew that there's an awareness, but I also saw the revenues go from $1 billion in 90 to $2 billion in 95 to $3 billion in 2000, where the revenue streams allotted for good business decisions at new AAV levels. And to do all that I said, if that's gonna change over the next, if it's changed over the last decade of the 90s, it's just clearly going to go up in revenues in the 2000s. I want to optimize that. I want to put this provision in the contract. Because they kept saying, why do you want that when you have a 10-year contract? I said, because the reality of it is, I know the industry revenues are going to grow, and they did. They doubled in that 6-7 year period, so that I can then look at a marketplace here and say, if he plays well, he'll get a chance to get to that marketplace earlier and at a prime age, so that clubs would give him another long-term contract, another consideration of 10 years, where if you're at 34, they may only give you 3 or 4 or 5. They won't give you the length of contract that they would if you got out earlier.
Is there anything that would put baseball in a situation where the team's values would go down in any way? It just seems like as time goes on, the team's value continues to grow almost regardless. Or are there variables in place that could say otherwise?
Well, we've gone through recessions and franchise values have gone up.
Exactly.
We've gone through what's really kind of it's a rarity because it has amazing tax shelters. If you know anybody that's a CBA, Carl, you may want to get in on this, but it's the revenues that they gain. They can depreciate the contracts. They can do all of these beneficial tax dynamics to support the revenues of their other businesses. And also you're buying into a business that does nothing but it's recession proof and it appreciates. So sport now is on the grid where there's so many more people that want to buy these franchises, which is then causing the franchise values to go up to, you're talking about the Clippers were bought for $2 billion at the same price that the Dodgers were bought a few years before. So when you saw that the Clippers are going for near the same value as the Dodgers, you knew that the sports market and that we also have many, many more billionaires in the world that can afford to purchase these entities. And so the demand for them is greater. And in the current, I don't see anything but prosperity for sport, particularly baseball.
Have you been approached to own?
I've been asked to be general manager. I've been asked to be part owners of teams, be involved in groups to purchase teams. But when you're in homes and you're meeting 18-year-old boys and you're going and talking to college players, I wanted them to know that I would never violate our relationship. I would never, ever take what I know about them and negotiate against them, and never, ever do anything, because there's a lot of private conversations we have, and I always say, I will never work for a team. And I realize that in the agency field, that has happened many, many times with great despair for the players that were turned and all that information was given to the teams. But for me, being a lawyer, I would not violate that fiduciary relationship. And I hope that, someday that players always know. And I also think I benefit the game better. This game's given me everything in my life. Make players better, make them healthier, make them more psychologically efficient, greater executions of their contract. And then we can benefit baseball and make it better.
Good idea, Scott. Every time you
Great
talk to the
ideas.
media, every time, did you hear this? Scott Boras says this. It's like, man, if there's a capacity where Major League Baseball wanted to, and I've, a lot of respect for Rob, good relationship, but your ideas are just so sharp and pointed. And so I guess maybe I'm just being selfish and thinking like, how can we get these ideas into more, does the league collaborate?
That we talked about the minor league structure and about we have bodies from 18 to 23 that are clearly, and even a pitcher's body, some of the big tall guys, 25, 20, they're not mature. We've got to get them in. We've got to develop them correctly. We have to monitor them. We have to give them nutrition. We have to do all these things, and to have healthcare professionals that are there to structure and grow these guys. Like the problem with the draft now, we got players that they finish playing high school in the middle of May. They don't get to play professional baseball until August, and then they're going to come in there and try to do what? Impress. And then they're going to overextend themselves, and they're going to hurt themselves. And then their bodies have not been doing anything for 2 months because they don't want to get hurt before the draft. So we have all these problems about, and we're saying we're worried about having a draft show. And I said, no, you got to worry about protecting the greatest talent that's going to feed the next generation of the game. That should be the focus. The minor leagues should be about growing bodies correctly, about getting foundations of their physicality there, so then they can go out and execute what they do in the game. And that's why when they talked about reducing the lower levels of the minor leagues, I said, great, we're going to have better environments because they have these beautiful spring training sites. We're going to have multiple leagues around those sites so that we can have different grades. And then when they do, they put one league in. Well, they need to, and they cut the draft to 20. Well, guess what? If you know anything about talent, some of the greatest athletes can't hit. Because why? They've been playing basketball and football, and they come play baseball in high school for 3 months. They're brilliant athletes, and the scouts don't want to put them in the high level of the draft because they can't hit. They can't hit yet. And so, guess what type of athlete we're losing? We're losing the Afro-American athlete because we don't have enough rounds in the draft to take those moments where they bring them in. They're going to not get a first round bonus, but they're going to give them potentials to come in and play, develop. And then we're going to get more of that type of raw tooled athlete into baseball. But when you cut off the draft at 20, no scout in his right mind is going to go sign a guy who's a great athlete who can't hit because they only get 20 picks.
David Bettner, 35th rounder, right?
Just go down the list.
Rounds.
Keep going down the list, right? Keep going.
I could go on forever and ever. Yeah. I don't know, Jake, if you.
I just got one thing. It's been kind of on my mind a lot lately, and having these conversations with people about player development and why there isn't a better structure or better player development, guys in the right spots to help these guys get through the system. Because, people think that in professional baseball, there's the best pitching coaches, hitting coaches, player development guys. And that's not necessarily the case. And I understand, we all know the game is very hard and you can develop guys as much as you want. And a lot of guys still won't make it. But, and a lot of these teams can't spend the same amount of money the Dodgers can or the New York Yankees, but they can develop their guys. And if you're going to pay these guys this amount of money in the draft, why wouldn't you do everything you can in your power to protect that investment, to feed them well, to make sure their travel's appropriate, they're comfortable? Because if you expect this guy to be your starting shortstop in the major leagues, why wouldn't you do everything in your power to make sure he's well taken care of and groomed to be ready to fill that position in 3 or 4 years?
I think the one of the things we're experiencing in professional baseball is that always the managers and coaches and strength coaches and medical staff at the bottom are paid far less than those at the top because seniority is the rise. Well, in medicine, and I studied medicine, as you know, Jake, at pharmacology, but drug corporations bring in R&D people who are there to develop the latest product. And I'm going, okay, what kind of people are those? Well, they're substantial, brilliant PhDs who are some of the greatest minds in America who are brought in to develop something new. My point is, until you have a system where Major League Baseball says, we are like a university, we have tenure, any coach, anybody at this level that comes in gets these types of rewards, this type of insurance, this type of dynamic. And every club must contribute a certain amount of money. We do this so that all the managers, coaches, development people are commonly paid regardless of the team, and it's done from a Major League Baseball standard. Then you're going to attract a level of employees that have a career opportunity rather than being part of something of an individual team and such where you're worried about tenure, worrying about so you're going to be honest about what's going on, and you're going to get more of a universal method for development that is certified more in a league standard than an individual standard. And then you're going to get more protection for players. You're going to get a higher standardization. You're going to get a quality of of entry-level performance where some of your greatest minds and highest paid people are actually working at the inceptional level, so that we are really controlling the health, psychology, and standards of these players from the beginning of their career.
Well, in the first couple of years are essentially some of the most important to catapult them to where we want them to be in the future. You're exactly right about that.
Man, you like I said that when you bring up ideas are all sharp, and then you went and just rattled off a bunch of awesome ideas that were super sharp. Like you lived up to the billing. Scott Boras on starting night. Scott, thank you so much for making time for us. Busy schedule. I'm curious, what do you do for the All-Star game though? Like now, what are you good?
Well,
what's on tap the rest of the day? Guy going to the game or what?
Yes, I'm going to the game. I actually get to share it with my family a bit, and
Awesome.
But it's also neat for me because I get to spend time with Jake Arrieta because it's always a special
Always good
moment.
seeing you, man.
It really is.
Look better than ever too.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for making time.
Legend. Let's get back to the show.
All right, that's Scott Boras. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it's always good to see him and the guys. I've developed a great relationship with his whole company. You know, from Scott Champerino, Mike Fiore, Calvin Murray. I mean, all these guys. They're baseball guys. That's what they love to do, and how he talked about the team of people that he puts in place to support his players, from sports psychologists to trainers to nutritionists. He's got a training facility in Southern California for his guys. You know, more agents are starting to do that because they understand the importance of. I mean, everybody's trying to protect their investment, and one thing Scott talked about is, doing everything in his power to take care of the players and their families, and that's what he does.
Yeah. I wanted to sign with him on the spot. I wanted to go back in time and become a prospect worthy of his advice and be like, what do you think I should do? To be around somebody who's that dialed in and that focused and that excellent, like just sit next to him having that conversation, is weird and lame as this may sound. Like you could feel it just sitting next to him. Like there is a physical thing in the air where you're like, man, this guy's going. This feels so good to hear what he's talking about. And there is this part where selfishly, damn, I would love to see Scott Boras go work for the league. I would love to see Scott Boras take some kind of umbrella advisory role where he had like a say in minor league development, pace of play rules, and the obviously player arbitration stuff and service time issues. But it seems like he's obviously very convicted and dedicated to his singular focus within the game. And it's crazy to see how broad that focus can go, where it's like, I just want to help guys secure as much money as possible and like protect them and take care of them. And now he's talking about, dude, he's got hundreds of people working for him. He's got, like you were talking about, the medical staff, the training staff. Like, imagine just going to your, like, hey, I'm an agent, come sign with me. And then you've got Scott Boras over here who's like, hey, I got all these doctors that are going to make sure they're going to verify everything the team says. Like, you can't compete with that.
And then I think we were both shocked to find out that he was the guy that first introduced the player option, the opt-out, which is very, very cool to me. And being with Scott for 12 to 15 years. I didn't know that. And he did the first $100 million deal, and he continued to set records for players year in, year out. And I think it was Kevin Brown who was the first $100 million contract, and he was setting records with guys like Greg Maddux year after year. And players need to understand the importance of that, because if there's not people in place, and look, Scott's not the only one doing it. He's one of the guys doing it at the highest level. But if guys aren't doing that sort of thing in that sector of the game, the behind the scenes stuff, then you're not going to be able to benefit from those sorts of record-setting deals once you get to the big leagues or once you get to free agency with the opportunity to sign a long-term multi-year deal.
Can you ever see him retiring?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen at some point. But as I mentioned, I don't think I've ever seen somebody that works as hard as him and probably sleeps as little as he does. So at some point he's going to need to lay down and take a nap. I mean, the guy just continues to work and work and work. But that would be an interesting question for him. I doubt he envisions an end in sight yet. But yeah, he can't do it forever.
But if somebody were to do it forever, it would probably be Scott Boras.
Yeah, it'd probably be him. Yeah, I mean, you look at people look at Tom Cruise. I mean, the guy doesn't age. Maybe we all need to start going to his doctor and seeing. Maybe they found the fountain of youth. Maybe it's Scientology. I don't know.
We don't say the S word on this show. I'm not trying to get stalked. Okay, what about just a couple quick things before we go? Poor Drew Jones. I don't know if you saw the second overall pick in the draft. He was taking his first day as a pro, taking BP, messes his shoulder up. I almost said a bad word there. Credit to me.
Signed his deal though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It sucks, but the dude's young and he's got testosterone just flowing, and he can recover. His cells will be fine. Yeah, it sucks. It definitely sucks, but that first installment will come in, and he'll start his rehab. He'll get himself a new car, and probably finally take his pops out to dinner and pay. He's gonna be fine.
Yeah, he's going to be I don't know, it's just sad because it's like you just get going, but chances are all he was going to do this year is play a handful of games in the Arizona Fall League, or
Right.
not even in the Arizona Fall League, like the Arizona
And what was
Development League.
how what they say about the injury? Was it like a serious injury or?
Serious injury to the non-throwing shoulder. But then again, it's like you could say it's a serious injury to be the number 2 overall pick and then have an injury where like season ending. It doesn't give me a threshold of how serious the injury is, because like you're the number 2 overall pick. Like if you twisted your ankle and I'm the GM, I'm like, you're done for the year, kid. Like go ice that ankle.
Yeah, they'll do whatever they can to make sure that he's rehabbing and recovering fine. I just hope he doesn't have to miss. If it's that serious, he needs surgery. He may even miss a little bit of next season, which we don't want to see happen. And a guys, especially that high of a pick, you want to see them have a nice offseason, progress into spring training, and hit the ground running and start their careers.
We have a big day coming up in baseball next week on Tuesday with the trade deadline at 6 p.m. So we'll be able to squeeze in another show before the trade deadline. I would imagine there's going to be some movement next time we get together. I like Sunday night. I like after the Sunday afternoon games, and the GMs are like, we're going into a fresh week. We got to make our moves tonight. So I think there's going to be some action Sunday night.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see, and there's always a couple moves that are made that where you kind of go, wow, like I didn't expect that to happen. So I look forward to some of those trades.
Do you remember, how did you find out you were getting traded to Chicago in 2014?
2013, but there was rumblings of trades, and I was talking to Scott, and I was confident that a move was going to be made, and I was in Norfolk. I think I just had pitched, it was the day before, just had pitched. It was just, not very good, and the spirits were down, and I was pretty much ready to get out of there, and waiting for that phone call, and Scott called me, and who was the GM at the time? I think it was might have been Andy McPhail. Gave me a phone call and let me know that I had been traded to Chicago, along with it was me and Strope for Feldman, and I couldn't pack my shit quick enough. I was just really excited to get out of there and have a fresh start. So yeah, and that started everything for me, and it could be a very similar position for some of these guys near the trade deadline this year. So it'll be exciting to see what happens, man.
The trade deadline is obviously a big moment in the MLB season, but just as fans, I think this is such a cool thing that baseball has that basketball, football, hockey miss out on, is just this overwhelming excitement as a baseball fan. We're missing one thing. We need one thing. Once we get that one thing, we're ready to rock and roll. It's like the grass is greener on the other side. And we're approaching that next Tuesday. If your team's in the hunt, like we said last episode, this is one of the best places to be as a sports fan, where the guys that are working for your team, the guys who own your team, the people that are involved in ushering and the success and stuff. Like, they actually sincerely want to go get it. If you are lucky enough to have that, God bless. I'm not, right? I'm just sitting watching baseball like, oh, cool. Josiah Gray pitched pretty well against the Dodgers last night. I'm doing everything I can to find interest at like a national level, but God bless the organizations and clubs that are out there that are going to be making moves to get their clubs in a better spot to go win and try and win a World Series. As Colin points up to the sky.
Yeah, he's looking for a big boost. He's looking for a big boost, and I think they might get it. We want to thank everybody for listening, and don't forget, continue to like and subscribe to the channel, and continue the ride with us.
And we're close to your studio or your house, your office. It's
next week.
Close.
Next week. It's going to look beautiful.
And it's my internet fucking up today for once.
It's not mine.
So Jake's on the good side of stuff. So yeah, if there's any choppiness or whatever, I'm gonna have to go through this and see how it went. But my apologies and bear with me. I'm moving into a new house right now, so shit's going wild.
He's on the up and up.
Moving sucks. Matt start winning a couple games. Colin moves into a new place. Fuck your internet, Colin. He's been waiting to make that joke for 3 months too. So
it's fine. I deserved it. But now, hey, we're sailing. We're smooth sailing.
Good week. Next week, we're going to come back. I think Zach Gallen is going to be joining us, the number one pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks, in a really cool laid-back interview. We touch a little bit on the relationship with Madison Bumgarner and just pitching in Arizona, what it's like being like a young stud. And we got some more good stuff coming again. Thanks, everybody, for subscribing, and we'll see you guys soon.
Good show, fellas.